Up next, I'd like to introduce our first expert panel conversation of the day, which will be focusing on stepping up their game, how talent acquisition leaders are adapting to a changing market. Here are some of the key questions we'll explore. Rarely have talent acquisition leaders faced such stiff competition from their peers, as well as choosy job candidates. How are they rethinking their roles and strategies? How are they responding to a workforce that wants to see a greater sense of purpose in their workplace? What role will technology play in recruiting and workforce planning? And finally, how are talent acquisition leaders developing a remote work labor pool in which geographic boundaries are evaporating? As our moderator for this session, we are delighted to welcome our marvelous moderator, Lydia Dishman, who is a staff editor for Fast Company, who has covered leadership, diversity and inclusion, and workplace issues for many publications, including CBS Money Watch, Fortune, Popular Science, and the New York Times. Lydia, I would take it over to you, but I see that you are not here yet. So you know what I think we'll do is just go around to our panel while Lydia is logging on and ask each of you to kind of introduce yourselves in terms of what you do and your company, and just let the audience know what's going on. Kendall, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick. My name is Kendall Mesner. I lead global strategic talent acquisition at UST, a private 26,000 person global digital platforms and products organization headquartered in Southern California. Great to be here.
Thanks, Carrie.
Great to be here, and good afternoon, everybody. Carrie Royer, and I lead the global talent acquisition team for Verizon. 120,000 strong employees and based out of New York.
I'll hop in to fill the silence.
Sorry,
good day,
everyone. Please go ahead. Good job.
From wherever you're calling in from. I'm Tarek Myers. I'm the co-CEO of Canvas. We're a diversity recruiting platform approaching about 100 employees strong. Our mission is to make the world more equitable by broadening access to transformative careers. I've worn a number of different hats while being at the organization a little over the year, but my number one passion is culture. And so I'm excited to be with these giants. And I'll pass it along to Judy.
All
Thanks,
right,
Tarek.
thank
Perfect.
you. Hi, everyone. Judy Wong at Charter Spectrum, about 100,000 employees in 41 states. I lead executive recruiting for the entire organization, as well as corporate talent acquisition. And we're based in Stamford, Connecticut.
Great. And
I guess
that
leaves me.
Chad, yes, please go, Chad.
All right. Yeah, thanks for having me today. I work for Attuned. I run the global team. Attuned focuses on making work more meaningful by looking at intrinsic motivation and engagement. Prior to that, I did recruitment in Japan. I ran recruitment teams, which is one of the most difficult markets in the world for recruitment, as some of you that may cover that region may know. I'm based in Tokyo as we are, so it's 3:30 a.m. here.
Oh my goodness. Thanks for being with us in the middle of the night. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. Let's ask some questions here. First one up is, have you changed your strategy with regard to sourcing candidates? Jude, just randomly. Judy, would you like to go first? I think you have your mute button on there.
Thank you.
There you go.
The market has definitely changed quite a bit in the past 6 months or so. And so we've absolutely needed to evolve. I mean, the volume of hiring has really picked up significantly. There's more attrition. That's on top of our business unit hiring. Recruiters are finding that it's much harder to hire than it ever used to be. Candidates are receiving a lot more calls. So we need to make more of an effort to attract their attention. And then when we connect with candidates, they have even higher expectations than we've previously seen. Not that we didn't see them before, but rather there's just an expectation of even more defined career paths, even more flexibility, even more benefits, and even higher compensation. So absolutely, the market has changed and we've needed to adapt to that.
Great. And now I see that we are joined by the real moderator instead of the imposter, me. So Lydia, would you like to take it away? We were just asked the first question about changing strategy given in terms of sourcing and so on. So over to you.
Right. Thank you so much. And apologies for the little bit of technical hiccup that we had. Even 2 years in, these things tend to still happen. We can never predict, but thanks everyone for joining us. And Judy, thanks for that intro and brief bit about the strategy. We'll continue to go around. Kendall, why don't you go next?
Sure. Thank you, Lydia. Appreciate it. I think, what I'd say about the strategy and has it changed, it absolutely has changed. It's a matter of how many times and how often it's changed, to be frank. I think we've really seen some wild swings in terms of what's been top of mind with candidates in a very competitive market throughout the pandemic. I'd probably identify 3 things. There's the ebb and flow of attraction to virtual openings. At times, candidates have stated, I miss people. I want to see them. A month later, people need to back off. Do you have virtual opportunities? That's all I want to look at. Secondly, it's compensation, doing battle with work-life balance. You have top drivers, as a top driver amongst candidates. So you have the world of the burned out that's gaining in population right now. And there's some great workers in this group. And then finally, a culture with a sense of community, of togetherness and belonging has become increasingly essential, not just to retain talent, but also for attracting them in the first place, which we could get into. But that's what I've seen.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the burnout is interesting. I was talking to a data scientist from Gallup the other day who mentioned that they are seeing a trend towards frontline managers reporting higher levels of burnout than other levels of employees. So that's an interesting factor as well that may be contributing to the quit rate that we're seeing right now. Tarek, how about you go next?
Yeah, no, thank you for inviting me into the conversation. I'm on the other end of the spectrum, right? Like approaching 100 employees internally, grew an incredibly diverse team during the pandemic, which, we were very lucky to do so. I love this idea of combating burnout because I think that folks' relationship to work has changed, right? Where changing a job is as easy as changing a Zoom link. And so the reality is that the future of work, frankly, owns us nothing. Look how tough it was for us to get on this Zoom. We could be at another company tomorrow. And so this was really top of mind for us when we walked into 2021, because, I think prior to the pandemic, we were designing employee experience based on, I think, some assumptions of what our teams needed. We're using some engagement surveys. We had some nap pods. We had some free lunch. The swag was really cool, everything else in between. But what we've realized in attracting such a diverse workforce is that everyone has a different type of need, right? So beyond this idea of flexibility, this idea of combating burnout is an equity issue, right? That what a caregiver may need is very different than, someone who may be differently abled, maybe different than someone who's part of our gender nonconforming community or our trans community. And so this idea of burnout is really just meeting people where they are and giving them that flexibility. One of the things that we implemented pretty early on in 2021 was quarterly wellness days. Instead of us trying to design some volunteer day off or tell folks how they should spend their time, we give folks $175 stipend every quarter, take the day off and go do what you need to do to recharge. So culture is changing, flexibility is changing, but this idea of burnout remains the same. And so we're just trying to step up to that need.
Chad, how about you go next?
Yeah, I love this conversation because there's aspects of this and there's aspects of specifically intrinsic motivation that we can measure and that we've seen change since the start of the pandemic. When we look at things like, for example, security and financial needs, we saw notably that those things went up, especially early stage during the pandemic, and companies have been trying to adjust to that. To bring it back to kind of the original question, just looking at more specifically the last 6 months, it's the competitive landscape is incredible for recruitment. Like working in Japan for the last 10 years, it's been such an incredibly tight recruitment market, but we've seen that the nature of, I guess, that competitive landscape has changed a lot given work from home, given what the benefits are. A lot of what Tarek said about, like having great swag or a great office or what you're offering to people, it really becomes how you differentiate your organization, either through your interview process, through your product, through your values. Like those are the things that are resonating with people now.
Carrie, chime in.
Yeah. Well, thank you. It's great to be here with everybody, and I'm loving the conversation as well. I would say, listen, I think the biggest differences are candidates are absolutely in the driver's seat right now, and companies have to respond differently. We know that they're prioritizing those human engagement factors over more transactional factors, and so I think candidate experience and employer brand are more important now than ever before. And then the other thing that hasn't been mentioned yet, just a kind of a different way of thinking about it, is, so what can employers do outside of the softer side? And one of the ways we've been thinking about it is, we know that the demand for talent is greater than the supply in a lot of cases, and that gap is continuing to get bigger. And so, I think that companies have no choice but to really start thinking differently and considering a non-traditional approach and non-traditional talent to fill their roles. And so, that's just something that we've been particularly focused on here.
Another statistic that I ran across recently was alongside this extraordinarily high quit rate, there is almost historic numbers of people starting businesses because they don't want to work for someone else anymore, and they feel like they can just take it and run with it on their own. So when we talk about a competitive market, you all are not just competing with other organizations, you're also competing with an entrepreneurial spark that we've not quite seen at this level. So what is it going to take to entice people? And so with regards to that, let's drill down a little bit more. Carrie, you sort of kicked it off in a certain way of drill down into strategy and tools. What are you doing to find talent in places that you haven't necessarily looked before necessarily? Judy, why don't you start this one?
Sure. We've been working really hard to ensure that our recruiters have as many tools available to them as possible. And I swear, Tarek and I did not talk about this, but we are piloting Canvas to ensure that we're taking a look at as much diversity as possible and really prioritizing that. But we're leveraging just various other resources as well. I think we all have access to LinkedIn, but our technical recruiters really enjoy Seek Out and find that it's been very, very helpful for them. We also just internally make it very easy, or have made it easier for our recruiters to even leverage agencies, because it is just all hands on deck. Use whatever means you possibly can to get these candidates attracted and in the door.
I've heard whiffs of the fact that employers are offering referral bonuses that are actually higher than they used to in order to get people at least into the interview process. Kendall, has that resonated for you?
A little. I think also just you are where you pay attention to. So, across the board, I would say we've done a lot of the same, only with this enhanced level of awareness that's been brought to bear. Some of the referral bonuses have been a little bit higher. I would echo, though, that things like Seek Out have proven to be very effective in going around LinkedIn, as there's a lot of LinkedIn burnout out there too, or I think a lot of folks have just turned it off. Like, okay, I've already changed jobs every 3 months for the last 2 years. I think I'll take a break, or whatever the case may be. So, really, it's been much the same, with a little bit more in utilizing tools that provide new and less utilized connections to prospects that do reach outside of LinkedIn, and then partnering with marketing and really working to get the word out through new channels has been probably the most effective thing that we've done in the meantime. And that part of that is we just did our first global rebrand relaunch in the middle of last year. And so it's all about raising awareness here.
Absolutely. Tarek, you wanted to chime in there?
Yeah, Kendall, Judy, I love the points because when we talk about talent power, actually, Carrie, I think you point this out as well. Within the context of diversity, I think what we're seeing is that this shift that, especially for underrepresented groups, it's no longer these communities kind of busting down the big company doors or knocking at the door looking for opportunity. In many ways, kind of folks are sitting back and saying, for the last decade, many of our organizations have made these brand promises of inclusion. And
Yes.
now in such a competitive job market, folks are sitting back and saying, now I want to make sure that the brand promise matches the brand experience. And so the one silver lining in this pandemic that I know we're all aware of is the fact that it's broadened opportunity to build even more diverse workplaces than we've seen in the past, where we're no longer bound. We were once a Silicon Valley based organization. Now we have folks who are across every corner of the US and soon, to be globally. And the reality is that the opportunity is there, but I think technology has helped us build this bridge. The one caveat that I want to make, though, is that even through our own platform, but frankly, through many of our sister organizations as well, we're seeing that there's this new emphasis on supporting recruiters find folks whose values match the organization's values, right? And that's where some of the other talent networks has failed. It's no longer about pedigree, right? It's no longer about that degree. It's no longer about that previous company. It's not about lowering the talent bar, but it's about expanding it. So maybe when we once saw a signal from those graduates from Stanford and Harvard and MIT Sloan, now we're seeing that folks who may not have gone to post-secondary education, or folks who are self-taught, or folks who didn't go to school at all, are still being able to showcase their skills in some of these different platforms that they're not able to do on a LinkedIn or otherwise. And the same is true for values. Folks are saying, yeah, I may not have gone to this school, or I may have gone to this school, but that's not the only signal for success and role. Now I want to go to an organization that offers flexible time off, an organization that cares about me as a caregiver, that cares about me as in terms of offering bereavement benefits. So I think to kind of marry Judy, Kendall, and Carrie's points, there's this beauty that it's no longer that we're seeing this new diversity opportunity that's no longer grounded in previous experience and pedigree, but now there are all these different signals that exist in the universe that recruiters can now find to find the talent that best suits their organizations. So kudos to all of you.
That puts a heavy onus on the recruiters and hiring managers for sure, because yes, the signals are out there. And I think that the default for some, present company excluded, has often been like, oh, we need people of color. Let's just go to some HBCUs and then Howard University, Spelman, boom, and we're done. We check that box and it's over.
That's right.
So, so what is it going to take to get beyond that? Chad, you pressed your button there, so I feel like we're in a game show.
Well, I love following Tarek because he sets me up for a lot of points that I'm excited to make. So I'm just going to keep hanging on after him. It's fantastic because I think what we're seeing, particularly with Attuned, is the interest in not just culture fit, but culture add, and the different ways that you can look at that and the different ways that you can evaluate that. And it was something that for a long time, it's been something that in an interview process, we're trying to judge and we're trying to understand, like, okay, how does this person fit with the organization and how does it add? And one of the things that Attuned is trying to do is to measure that and to bring that to the interview process, not just for the employers, because we have to remember that, in this kind of competitive market, it's a two-way street. Like, they're evaluating you at the same time and they're deciding, like, do I want to join this organization? And they want to know what your values are, and not just the values that you put on the website, but the values that you live every day, and how you, approach things like diversity and inclusion, or how you think about things like, career progression. And we're starting to see how much that's impacting, how people kind of perceive an interview process or a company. and what companies can do to kind of bring that in and create that transparency in the interview process about who they are, what they do, and then how that person will, fit in the organization and what they will bring that maybe the organization needs, whether it's, 120,000 people or 100.
Don't go yet. Rewind just a little bit and tell me though about sourcing. Where are you finding these people that are the culture ads?
That's a great question. And for Japan specifically, I mean, only 2% of the population is on LinkedIn. So you want to talk about saturation? There's 25,000 recruiters in Tokyo, and they're all going to the same place. To be honest, like in my experience, it was always word of mouth and referrals. Like the company that I ran was focused on tech companies, a lot of startup businesses. And once we developed, I guess the marketing tools for that, the word of mouth for that, that's how we really generated. I always thought of like, every time if you work with recruiters, they say like, we have the best candidates, we have, this and that, but it's a Venn diagram, and every recruitment company just has this sliver of uniqueness, right, on the outskirts of the main population that everybody has, which is on LinkedIn and et cetera. And so it's how you represent that sliver, specifically. And so, yeah, I think that's been my experience, at least.
Good to know that word of mouth is alive and well. Analog, doesn't go down when the power goes out. Carrie?
Yeah, I just want to highlight the conversation about technology, and we may get more into that later, but I just want to make the point that if you're using the technology to look for the same things, it's not going to expand your pipeline, right? And so that's why I just want to emphasize that one of the ways that we're sourcing and thinking about talent differently is truly that skills-based approach. And there's some great technology that uses AI sourcing that helps you identify what are those adjacent skills. But even more so, we're also talking about investing and really amplifying our investment in programs that help us go after those underrepresented talent. And so I'll just give you a flavor of one of those programs. We have a program that we call our Verizon Thrive Apprenticeship Program. And it started as part of our Verizon CSR efforts for economic and social advancement and helping to reskill and upskill people for jobs of the future. So we're essentially looking for people that are in jobs right now that are at risk of job displacement. And we work with our partners to put these folks in a boot camp where they go and they learn these foundational technical skills for these jobs. And then we hire them onto Verizon, and they go through a 1-year apprenticeship program and really helping them hone their skills and evolve their skills and get that continued training. And that ultimately, our goal is to hire those folks into permanent jobs. So that's just one type of the types of programs that I think are really making a difference. And if you think about, some diversity, these folks are generally highly diverse from underrepresented areas. And so it's not just the CSR initiative, but it's absolutely a critical talent pipeline for companies to keep in mind.
Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned that, because as I said earlier about I just alluded to it based on referrals, but I know that a lot of organizations are placing a heavy emphasis now on upskilling their existing labor pool, and not just the high posts, as you all may have heard before, but people that may be sort of the middle level players, and really trying to bring them up into other roles. So why don't we talk about that for a minute? Carrie, you mentioned these programs, but Judy, is Spectrum doing anything similar to develop existing employees and prepare them for open positions?
We are. A great example is one of our business units. We found that we had a lot of recruiter openings, a lot. And I don't think that's an unusual situation for many of us here. And we needed to be creative. And in that particular business unit, we decided we would approach actually our call center supervisors and say, you know what, you might consider a role as a recruiter. And who would ever imagine We had the leader of that overall business unit just encourage the business overall through a note that went out to the entire business. And we ultimately ended up hiring a number of recruiters just through that effort. And the thought was, yes, you are going to need to backfill those supervisors, but much easier to backfill a supervisor than it is to find a recruiter in today's marketplace. So that was just one way to say, we've just got to think a little bit outside of the box. If the pool of recruiters is just this big, we just have to figure out how to expand that pool. And that was just one way to look internally and look to see what sort of transferable skills we could find.
Transferable skills, so important. And I think that speaks to Tarek's earlier point. Kendall, I'm coming to you next, but I just did want to say that, if a company is really serious about inclusion and sourcing candidates from everywhere possible, because you can now, then that also plays into putting your money where your mouth is. Kendall, what did you want to add to this?
Oh, I was just going to add a couple quick things. One is, this certainly does lead directly to our Step It Up America program, which is a program here at UST. It's been in force for about 4 years. It's getting bigger and better with each year, it seems, but it's a program that in which we are giving United States military veterans and minority women that have not had opportunity at any kind of training in technology. We're giving them the training and then placing them into our clients, placing them into our own organization. We started that in Alpharetta, Georgia. Now we've parlayed it out to 8 major metros in the US. And it's a great program. Also, I think, one thing that we looked at as pandemic hit, just as it hit was, and I think you said this earlier too, Lydia, that's one thing to check a box and be compliant. And of course that's important, but if you really want to get serious, my thinking was, let's get serious about hiring actual people from these diversity groups and be very proactive about it. One of the things that we did was created very specific Boolean strands that would ensure we are looking at LGBTQ first. We're looking at differently abled. We're looking at cultural diversity first. And sure, if you don't find go after those candidates first. If you've got 20 outreaches to folks that are of that group, fantastic. Then move on to your next search. If you're not finding them, then remove them. But what we've asked is give those special groups the first consideration. It's made a big difference.
Mm-hmm. So kind of like Rooney Rule, but not exactly. And I'm thinking about this too in terms of compensation structure, because obviously candidates are interested in what compensation they are going to receive, and it might be the thing that makes them say yes or no. Tarek, you had mentioned about nap pods, which I had a little chuckle about, because that seems like now it's sort of the archaeological dig of workplace perks from the before times.
That's right.
What is the role of compensation in attracting candidates? And are you doing anything different to be more attractive?
Yeah, I'm in my nap pod now, so I guess I still have one. I have a lovely little couch over here. I'll say this. I remember pre-pandemic, I was at Coinbase. Crypto was an emerging kind of industry, and I remember that compensation was the #1 driver for both attracting candidates, but also, frankly, losing candidates in the process. Mm-hmm. I had a very different experience recently, right? Where during my time at Canvas, while compensation and wanting to reward folks to be able to live the flexible lives that they want to live is important, it actually isn't as much of a driver as culture has been, to be honest. So I'll start with saying what the steps we took with compensation, and then I'll talk about this recent study with MIT that showed that actually there might be a different story that's out here. So the first is with comp. it was really important to me from day one when kind of taking on this co-CEO role to make sure that we were paying our folks equitably, worked with a women-owned firm out of Canada to really start tracking some of the compensation trends that we were seeing in recent years, especially during the pandemic. And one of the things that was noted was that while compensation overall is becoming more competitive and increasing across industries, it's also normalizing across the US. So for some of those organizations, as an example, that say, hey, you have 30 days to move and then you're locked into this compensation band, and you're weighing another organization that says, hey, if you're living in a region, like let's say the Bay Area, that has a higher cost of living, we'll pay you a slight premium, but overall, we are going to normalize compensation across the US. I'm finding that more employees are going for give me the flexibility to live anywhere I want in the US, give me the flexibility to kind of, set my roots that keeps me happy and flexible, as opposed to being locked into some regional based compensation structure. And we're lucky enough to have such a small employee population that we can meet employees where they are. But when it comes to retaining employees, right, compensation actually isn't what's top of mind for folks, or at least within our context. MIT and Sloan recently did a study that found that when we were predicting attrition across industries, but even in particular with like a 23% attrition rate in internet and software, culture was, I think, like 10.4 or 10 times more likely to be a predictor of employee attrition than compensation was, right? And so while compensation is an input to culture, right, getting folks where they are, meeting folks where they need, and rewarding folks for the work that they contribute to the organization, it isn't the number one driver for our industry or for our context. So we're leaning a lot more into making sure that, yes, we have competitive comp as a startup, but that we're actually going a step further and saying, what does this actually mean and reflect about our culture?
Absolutely. And even before the pandemic, I know that Glassdoor's annual survey used to turn up culture as the number one thing that made people want to work at a place. And above compensation. So that's really interesting. Chad, I'm sure you have something interesting to say about this competitive market that you're in and what compensation is a driver for.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Of course, it's important. Like, people have a fundamental need, and you have to be able to meet that need from a financial perspective. But it's all about flexibility and the mobility that people have. And so what we're seeing here is a lot of, we had a case not too long ago where a candidate that we were working with had offers from the UK, in Japan and Indonesia, and was kind of thinking about not just the money that was involved, because the money meant different things in different places, but it was really about like what the lifestyle was, and what how they were going to fit their personal life and the professional life, and how those things piece together. And I think that because the salary and what is one of the main mechanisms, it's one of the main levers that any company would have in an offer stage, we can overcompensate for that because we don't understand all the other things that are going into that decision-making process for a candidate, which is, when I was a recruiter, like having that consultative relationship was super important. But what I'm seeing now, focusing on intrinsic motivation, is that, because we talk so much about the financial side of things, it can actually overshadow a lot of the decision-making process that candidates go through when they're actually evaluating other things. And the interesting thing is they're not always very aware of what they're evaluating or how they're expressing it, either to an internal recruiter, an external recruiter, how they're expressing it in the interview process. Because what we talk about on offer letters is, hey, here's your salary, here's your start date, right? And so I think the challenge is finding a new vocabulary to bring into an interview process that doesn't just circle around those things. And that's one of the things that I try to work with our customers on.
Well, I think that now is as good a time as any to create a new taxonomy around compensation packages, and when I say comp, I'm not just talking about salary, although that is a big part of it, but certainly benefits. And you've all mentioned, or at least touched on, this notion of flexibility and how different it is person to person, organization to organization. Judy, do you have any thoughts about how compensation is playing a role in hiring right now?
It is
Many thoughts.
I have many thoughts. I wouldn't say that compensation has changed as a priority for many candidates. If anything, it's just many of the other priorities are much bigger now.
Mm-hmm.
And to many of the points that have been brought up, it is about culture. And even more importantly, given what's happened in the past recent months, it's about flexibility. That is actually the first question we typically get from candidates. The first question, is this role remote, or is there some sort of
Yes.
hybrid situation? And then you can proceed with the next part of the conversation. But our experience has been that candidates just simply expect that compensation is there. That's just a given, and that's table stakes. The rest of it is all about the culture, all about the flexibility, about my career path and growing. So just many other things that perhaps didn't have as much of a priority in the past are way more important today.
Carrie, you finding the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, we're always evaluating our comp, right, to make
Mhm.
sure that we're competitive. But to everybody's point, it's so much more than salary. And I would just say that focus on corporate purpose and how that has on the impact that it has on attracting and retaining talent is critical. And so I think employees want to know that they work for a company that's making a difference. I think they want to know that they can make a difference in the role that they're in, and that the companies that I have an opportunity to grow in the company that I'm in. And so, what we've done is really just try to emphasize that and change up our recruitment marketing strategy to really emphasize and promote that employer brand and really bring to life the EVP. And not just us saying it, but really through the voice of our employees, right? Having our own employees tell the stories of how they're delivering on those things, and for candidates to be able to get in a glimpse into the culture directly from the employees. And so that's one thing. And then I would just echo this emphasis on flexibility. And, at Verizon, what does hybrid mean, right? Or obviously we see the need for more roles to be virtual. And so one of the ways that we think about differentiating ourselves and how we've showed up for our employees is by approaching flexibility a little bit differently. Instead of saying, oh yeah, flexibility is, 2 days in the office or 3 days in the office or whatever it is, we've really empowered our leaders to create the flexibility by the role and by leader in the organization, and really empowering them to hear from their employees, because as many of you had mentioned on this call, it's different for everybody. And that to me is what flexibility is, not having these concrete, rules around that everybody has to conform to. So those are a couple of things that we're thinking about outside of compensation.
Kendall, how is remote work and flexible scheduling playing out in terms of hiring there?
Sure, big drivers, something that we were very good at actually anyway. We were able to pivot to an all virtual environment. This is a 26,000 person company within 2 weeks of pandemic's onset. So it's something that we're born to do, and something that is almost a matter of course for most of the roles that we have, especially non-client facing, in which they're asking folks to show up at their site. But as far as we go, that's something that is again a big driver. I'll also say, I do agree that comp increases are inspiring organizations to assess what can be done outside of comp. But I think also it's inspired us to also really take pause when a candidate, or is specifically, if you can tell that's their number one and only driver, you have to wonder if they're going to run after the next big package too. It has to be considered as a whole. We also are adding golden handcuffs to some of the larger packages as well, clawback clauses and things, of course, to discourage people from leaving within a certain set of time. If we're going to make the investment, we want them to be in it as well. And then finally, I'd say, to stem the tide of that, not just, culture is just a word, but opening the hood and showing the candidate what the culture is, inviting them to like we have a Thursday afternoon tea or coffee break in which we have the team show up, and it could be water cooler talk, it could be problem solving, but you get a good sense of the team that you're going to be a part of if you sit in on that session. So we've done that. It's been really successful in attracting recruiters to the team.
Well, I mean, this is just writing itself, because my last question to you in the last few minutes that we have is, as we've heard about the important role that having a purpose and a strong company culture does play in hiring, how are you communicating it to job seekers? But I'm going to ask you to just take it one step further. And this is a question for all of you, is we have a lot of people who are eagerly listening, who are trying to figure out how to do this within their own organizations. So flip the question a little bit and say, what advice would you give to a hiring manager and HR leader about communicating their company culture to job seekers?
Sure.
3, 2,
and what
1.
Absolutely. So our culture value statement, our values here at UST are humility, humanity, and integrity, which I dearly love. Managers, it's really just part of the DNA of the organization. It's built into it. Partnering with marketing is absolutely critical to ensure that it is on the website, it's on your career page, and what that means is on your career page. Most hiring managers talk about how that translates to their practice and to the role. So I just think, again, additional attention and being very, you got your boots on as a recruiter, you're the first contact. Always sell value. Value beats strategy. Culture will beat strategy every single time. That's what folks care about. We can figure strategy out, but really, that's what we found is really making sure that every recruiter is bringing it up in their pitch and their presentation of the organization.
Chad, advice?
Yeah, I'd say two things. Number one, take a look at your hiring process and the interview process, and make sure that you're not. There's so many things that can be broken in an interview process, whether that's a hiring manager that doesn't have the right questions, or the same questions getting asked over and over, or a kind of failure to adequately represent a lot of these things about your organization that you want to put forward, right? And as recruiters, you're not necessarily in control of that, but fundamentally looking at what a recruitment process should be from start to finish, what the candidate experience should be from start to finish, is so important to creating that differentiation and actually standing out from the crowd. If your interviews are just like every other company and what you're hoping to sell is just the idea, then I think you're going to be at a disadvantage. Which leads to my second thing: use tools to help show how your organization runs. So, we used to have those office visits. Kendall mentioned about, the inviting people in. There's a lot of things that companies are starting to do that really can help differentiate during that process. One of the things that, of course, we're working with people to help create that transparency, to show things like motivation, engagement, so that actually when you are in an interview, you can see the team that you're joining and you understand what their motivators are and how you'll fit into that, and what communication things might be difficult for you, and what's going to be super easy, right? And you can do that with data. We're starting to make that possible. And the other thing is, that put something interesting in your interviews, right? We're starting to see it used to be super popular for companies to ask these hard questions, whatever sort of ridiculous questions that you would see. There's been a few books written about it that companies would ask, to kind of test people's critical reasoning and thinking. I don't know if that's fun. If you can create something fun for the candidate, one of the things that we do, and I like to encourage, is we play a game with them. If you guys know Codenames, it's easy to play online. We invite people because what they see is, and we don't just bring managers, we actually bring anyone who's available can jump in. And so they're meeting people from a potential team that they're working with, from admins to salespeople to marketing people. We jump in, we play the game for an hour, we have a bunch of fun, and we get a window into how they interact with everyone, and they get a window into our our environment and culture. So it's very similar to what Kendall said, but maybe one of the things they walk away from is like, that was kind of cool. Like that was unexpected. And so there's so many things that you can do in your hiring process to actually create that differentiation.
Unfortunately, I am being told that that is our time. So additional insights from Judy, Tarek, and Kerry. Attendees, I'd encourage you to reach out to them and any of the panelists directly via LinkedIn and pick their brain. Thank you so much for having us.